The United California Bank Heist of 1972. The story begins not in California, but in the industrial heartland of Youngstown, Ohio, where Amil Dinsio had built what the FBI would later recognize as one of the most sophisticated criminal networks in American history. Dinsio operated a network of about 100 bad guys, safecrackers, strong-arm men, getaway drivers, con men, moles, loan sharks, bagmen, and various nefarious characters. This wasn't a ragtag group of amateurs. It was a professional criminal enterprise with the organizational structure of a legitimate business. By 1972, it was said in FBI circles that the Dinsio gang was the most prolific bank burglary crew in the history of the United States. In the years before 1972, the FBI estimated the gang had committed 30 successful burglaries and made off with more than $20 million, a staggering sum equivalent to over $150 million in today's currency. The tip that would change everything came from Jimmy Hoffa, the infamous president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. The intelligence Hoffa provided was extraordinary in its specificity. He knew which bank, which safe deposit boxes contained the money, and estimated that the total take, including the contents of all the other boxes, could be in the range of $30 million. This wasn't casual information. It was actionable. Intelligence from someone with access to the highest levels of American power and corruption. On February 21, 1972, Amil Dinsio, his wife Linda, and her brother Charlie Mulligan flew to California and checked into the Jubilee Motel in Linwood. This wasn't a pleasure trip. Amil had a bank to case. For over 2 weeks, from February 21st through March 8th, Dinsio conducted his initial surveillance of the United California Bank located in the Monarch Bay Shopping Center in Laguna Niguel, strategically positioned just off Pacific Coast Highway and mere miles from President Nixon's Western White House in San Clemente. During this reconnaissance phase, Dinsio studied every aspect of the target: the bank's daily routines, security patterns, staff schedules, customer traffic flows, and most importantly, the physical layout of the building. He identified the bank's vulnerabilities and began formulating the audacious plan that would become legendary in criminal circles, assembling the perfect crew. When Dinsio returned to Youngstown, he knew he needed specialized talent for this unprecedented job. The team he assembled represented the cream of criminal expertise. Amil Dinsio, the mastermind, 36 years old, 5'6" and 140 pounds of wiry, bank-busting talent. He had the deep-set eyes of a guy who spent too much time in the dark, and a nose that looked like it had been on the wrong end of a left jab. James Dinsio, Amil's brother, providing family loyalty and proven criminal expertise. Harry Barber, Amil's nephew, only 5 years younger than his uncle, who would serve as one of the key operatives. Ronald "Ronnie" Barber, Harry's younger brother, a Vietnam veteran who hadn't been the same since returning from the war, but whose military experience provided valuable skills. Charlie Mulligan, Amil's brother-in-law, a trusted family member with extensive criminal experience. Phil Christopher, an enforcer from the Cleveland Mafia with crucial expertise in alarm systems. Charlie Brokaw, considered by some to be the best alarm man in the Midwest, whose technical skills would be essential for bypassing the bank's security systems. This wasn't assembled hastily. Each member brought specific, complementary skills essential to the operation's success. As Harry Barber would later observe, "We weren't no weekend warriors. This was a business, a serious business, a detailed planning phase." The crew's preparation was meticulous and comprehensive. On March 15, 1972, 5 team members, Amil Dinsio, Charlie Mulligan, Phil Christopher, Charlie Brokaw, and Harry Barber, flew from Cleveland on Flight 73 to Los Angeles using their real names. They had no fear of detection because they believed that once the job was completed, no one would dare pursue them, given the alleged political connections of their target. They took a cab to 9803 San Carlos Avenue in Southgate, to Viola and Ken Barber's house, where Harry had spent his teenage years and Ronnie still lived. In a gesture typical of his character, Amil tipped the cab driver $100. Generous to a fault, as his daughter would later describe him. When Dinsio planned a bank job, he worked from a comprehensive checklist that had been refined through dozens of successful operations. Tools and equipment. Charlie Mulligan was tasked with acquiring the specialized equipment, hacksaws, acetylene torches, a motor, drill bits, copper wiring, sledgehammers, flashlights, walkie-talkies, gloves, ski masks, and most critically, explosives that would be needed to breach the vault. Firepower. The crew armed themselves with machine guns and shotguns. When Amil tried to buy a shotgun at a pawn shop, they wouldn't accept his out-of-state check. So he had Ronnie Barber purchase it for him, a seemingly minor detail that demonstrated the crew's attention to operational security, communication, and intelligence. Harry obtained police scanners, and the crystals tuned to frequencies used by Orange County deputies and local police. This would give them real-time intelligence about law enforcement response during the operation. The perfect hideout. Harry and Ronnie found an extraordinary base of operations. A condominium at the West 9 Villas on the fairway at El Niguel Golf Course in Laguna Niguel. This wasn't just any hideout. It was a Shangri-La, as Harry described it, fit for a bank owner rather than mere bank burglars. They paid $1,000 for 2 months' rent, positioning themselves just a couple of 3 woods away from their target, the getaway vehicle. The crew purchased a 1962 Oldsmobile Super 88, a sweet golden bronze hardtop that Charlie Mulligan bought using the alias Jimmy Eldon Wright of Glendale. But this wasn't just any car. They tore out the trunk floor, stuffed in all their equipment, and reattached the floor, creating a sophisticated hidden compartment that could transport their tools and eventual haul without detection. Despite their meticulous preparation, the crew made one critical error that would eventually lead to their downfall. Charlie Mulligan, taking advantage of his free time in sunny Orange County, decided to look up an old buddy from his school days in Youngstown, someone he had unseen in 20 years, who lived in Tustin, not far from the bank. This seemingly innocent act of nostalgia would later provide federal investigators with the thread that would unravel the entire operation, the entry and execution. The operation commenced on Friday evening, March 24, 1972, as the United California Bank closed for the weekend. The crew knew they had approximately 60 hours before the bank would reopen on Monday, morning a window of opportunity that would allow them to work methodically and thoroughly. The entry method they chose was both audacious and technically sophisticated. Rather than attempting to breach the heavily fortified ground-level entrances, they decided to attack from above. The gang gained entry to the vault by using dynamite to blast a hole in its reinforced concrete roof. This wasn't simply a matter of setting off explosives. It required precise calculation of the explosive charges needed to breach the concrete without causing structural collapse or triggering seismic sensors that might alert authorities. Phil Christopher's expertise with alarm systems proved invaluable during this phase. The crew had to navigate and disable multiple security systems designed to detect various forms of intrusion. The roof entry method was specifically chosen to bypass many of the ground-level motion detectors, pressure plates, and door window sensors that formed the bank's primary security perimeter. Once inside the vault area, the crew faced the monumental task of accessing the safe deposit boxes. The United California Bank's vault contained approximately 500 safe deposit boxes, each potentially containing valuables, cash, documents, or other items of worth. The crew systematically opened 458 of these boxes, a process that required both technical skill and tremendous physical endurance. This wasn't a smash-and-grab operation. Each safe deposit box had to be carefully opened using specialized tools, and the contents had to be sorted and evaluated for value and portability. The crew worked in shifts throughout the weekend, with some members serving as lookouts, while others worked inside the vault. The scale of the operation was staggering. They were processing hundreds of individual containers, each with unknown contents. Some boxes contained cash that could be immediately recognized as valuable. Others held jewelry, precious metals, important documents, or personal items whose worth might not be immediately apparent. The crew had to make rapid decisions about what to take and what to leave behind, all while working under the pressure of limited time and the constant risk of discovery. The multi-day nature of the operation allowed the crew to be thorough, but also presented unique challenges. They had to maintain operational security for an extended period, manage fatigue among team members, and coordinate their activities to avoid detection by passing security patrols or late-night employees who might happen by the shopping center. The crew returned to their luxury condominium hideout between work sessions, using the location not just as a base of operations, but as a place to rest and plan the next phase of their work. From their windows, they could observe any unusual activity around the bank or shopping center that might indicate they had been discovered. Throughout the weekend, they maintained communication through their police scanners, monitoring law enforcement frequencies for any indication that their presence had been detected. The fact that they could work for 3 days without interruption speaks to both their planning and their luck, a combination that would not last much longer, the escape and initial success. When the United California Bank opened for business on Monday morning, March 27, 1972, employees immediately discovered the devastation. The hole blasted through the vault's reinforced concrete roof was unmistakable evidence of a major criminal operation. The sight that greeted bank officials was unprecedented. 458 of the 500 safe deposit boxes had been systematically opened, their contents rifled through and selectively removed. The initial assessment of the damage took considerable time. Bank officials had to contact each box holder to determine what had been stolen, a process complicated by the fact that many customers weren't immediately available or were reluctant to fully disclose the contents of their boxes. The crew had made off with more than $12 million in cash and valuables, though estimates would later vary significantly due to the difficulty of precisely valuing the diverse contents of hundreds of safe deposit boxes. By the time the crime was discovered, the crew had already put significant distance between themselves and Laguna Niguel. Their specially modified 1962 Oldsmobile Super 88, with its hidden compartment packed with millions in cash and valuables, had proven to be the perfect getaway vehicle. The crew's plan had accounted for the delay in discovery, giving them crucial hours to execute their escape plan. The location of the bank just off Pacific Coast Highway had provided easy access to major transportation routes, allowing the crew to quickly reach Los Angeles International Airport or other departure points. Some crew members flew back to Ohio using their real names, the same brazen confidence that had characterized their arrival in California. The crew's behavior immediately after the heist reflected their belief that they had indeed pulled off the perfect crime. They had targeted what they believed to be Nixon's dirty money, funds that the president could never publicly acknowledge losing. In their minds, this meant there would be no serious investigation, no publicity, and no consequences. As Harry Barber would later reflect, this was easy street. There wasn't going to be no publicity, nobody coming after us. What was Nixon going to say? They took the money from the milk scam I pulled? This calculation would prove to be catastrophically wrong. But in those first days after the heist, it seemed they had achieved the impossible. The FBI's unprecedented response. When federal investigators realized the scope and sophistication of the United California Bank burglary, they launched what would become one of the largest criminal investigations in FBI history. The Bureau assigned a massive 125 agents to the case, an unprecedented allocation of resources that reflected both the scale of the crime and its potential political implications. Paul Chamberlain, the retired special agent who led much of the investigation, would later describe it as one of the most investigated cases in the history of the FBI. The assignment of so many agents wasn't just about the dollar amount stolen. It was about the technical sophistication of the crime and the growing suspicion that this wasn't the work of ordinary criminals. The first challenge facing investigators was simply cataloging the crime. With 458 safe deposit boxes compromised, agents had to interview hundreds of victims to determine exactly what had been stolen. Many box holders were reluctant to fully disclose their contents, particularly if those contents raised questions about tax compliance or the source of the funds. The sophisticated nature of the entry, blasting through a reinforced concrete roof, immediately indicated that this was the work of professionals with both technical expertise and significant resources. The precision required to breach the vault without triggering certain alarm systems or causing structural collapse suggested military or professional demolition experience. Investigators also had to consider the possibility that this was an inside job. The thieves had demonstrated detailed knowledge of the bank's layout, security systems, and operating procedures. Someone had provided them with architectural information about the building and specific intelligence about the contents of the safe deposit boxes. Crime scene investigators found limited physical evidence. The crew had been careful about fingerprints and had removed most of their tools and equipment. However, the explosive residue from the roof breach provided some clues about the type and quantity of explosives used, which could potentially be traced through sales records. The investigation of the modified getaway vehicle proved more promising. Agents discovered that a 1962 Oldsmobile Super 88 had been purchased using false identification, and the sophisticated modifications to the trunk indicated professional criminal expertise. As the investigation progressed, FBI agents began developing profiles of criminal crews capable of such a sophisticated operation. The technical requirements, explosives, expertise, alarm system knowledge, safe-cracking skills, pointed to a relatively small pool of potential suspects. Agents also began investigating the political angle. Given the proximity to Nixon's Western White House and persistent rumors about the contents of the safe deposit boxes, while federal investigators would later dispute claims that Nixon campaign funds were involved, the political implications of the case added pressure for a rapid resolution. The investigation's breakthrough came not from the sophisticated crime scene analysis, but from traditional police work following financial transactions. Agents began tracking large cash transactions and unusual spending patterns in areas where they suspected the crew might have originated. The crew's confidence in their operational security had led them to make what Chamberlain described as stupid mistakes during their preparation phase. While they had been flawless at the bank job, their pre-heist activities provided the investigative threads that would eventually unravel the entire operation. The nostalgia that destroyed everything. The crew's downfall began with Charlie Mulligan's decision to contact an old-school friend from Youngstown during their stay in California. This seemingly innocent act of nostalgia, reconnecting with someone he had unseen in 20 years, who lived in Tustin, would provide federal investigators with the crucial link they needed. When FBI agents began investigating unusual activities in Orange County during the weeks leading up to the heist, Mulligan's contact with his old friend created a traceable connection between the crime and Youngstown, Ohio. This single thread allowed investigators to begin mapping the crew's entire network. Once investigators had identified Youngstown as a potential source of the criminal crew, they began intensive surveillance of known criminal networks in the area. Amil Dinsio's reputation as the most prolific bank burglary crew leader in the history of the United States made him an immediate suspect once the geographic connection was established. The FBI's vast investigative resources allowed them to reconstruct the crew's movements in California with remarkable precision. Agents discovered the crew's flights from Cleveland to Los Angeles, their ground transportation, their equipment purchases, and eventually their luxury condominium hideout. The arrests begin. The methodical FBI investigation culminated in a series of coordinated arrests that swept up most of the crew. According to reports, 7 of the 8 men involved were eventually arrested and later convicted. The arrests represented a significant victory for federal law enforcement and validated the massive resource allocation to the case. The conviction of 7 crew members was particularly satisfying to investigators. Given the sophisticated nature of the crime and the crew's initial confidence that they would never be pursued, the case demonstrated that even the most professionally executed crimes could be solved through persistent, methodical investigation. While the arrests were successful, the recovery of the stolen millions proved more challenging. The crew's professional approach extended to their financial planning, and significant portions of the haul were likely hidden or laundered before the arrests occurred. The question of money recovery remains one of the most intriguing aspects of the case, given the crew's experience and the time they had to execute their escape plan. It's probable that they had sophisticated methods for concealing and protecting their gains. The fact that one crew member managed to evade capture entirely suggests that not all aspects of the operation were uncovered. The legacy and lasting questions. The rumored connection to Nixon campaign funds, while never definitively proven, added a political dimension to the case that has persisted for decades. The proximity of the heist to Nixon's Western White House, combined with the timing during the 1972 election campaign and the Watergate investigations, created a perfect storm of conspiracy theories and speculation. Although federal investigators disputed claims that Nixon campaign funds were involved, the political implications of the case continued to generate interest long after the criminal proceedings concluded. The story became part of the larger narrative of corruption and criminal activity that characterized the Nixon era. Former Orange County Register reporter Keith Sharon's assessment that they were the best bank robbery team in the world reflects the grudging respect that even law enforcement officials had for the crew. As technical expertise and operational sophistication, the case highlighted both the possibilities and limitations of professional criminal enterprises. While the crew demonstrated that even the most secure financial institutions could be successfully targeted with sufficient planning and expertise, their ultimate capture also showed that modern investigative techniques and resources could eventually unravel even the most sophisticated operations. The enduring fascination with the United California bank heist has inspired books, documentaries, and films, including the 2019 feature film Finding Steve McQueen, which focused on Harry Barber's role in the operation. The story continues to captivate audiences because it represents a unique intersection of criminal audacity, political intrigue, and technical sophistication. The case also represents a turning point in federal law enforcement's approach to complex financial crimes. The massive FBI response and successful prosecution established precedents for investigating sophisticated criminal organizations and demonstrated the Bureau's commitment to pursuing even the most challenging cases. The unanswered questions. Despite the successful prosecution of most crew members, significant questions about the heist remain unanswered. The identity and fate of the crew member who evaded capture, the ultimate disposition of the stolen millions, and the true nature of the political connections alleged in the case continue to fuel speculation and investigation. The United California bank heist of 1972 stands as both a monument to criminal ambition and a testament to law enforcement persistence. It was a perfect crime that was almost perfect enough, undone not by the brilliance of its execution, but by the human tendency to make mistakes when the stakes are highest. In the end, the heist represents more than just a criminal case. It says a snapshot of American society in 1972, complete with political corruption, organized crime, and the clash between criminal sophistication and law enforcement determination. The story continues to resonate because it captures a moment when audacious criminals thought they could steal from the most powerful man in America and get away with it completely. They were wrong, but it took one of the largest federal investigations in history to prove it. Subscribe for this and many more stories.